Watch world-renowned Christian apologist Nabeel Qureshi as he masterfully tackles tough questions from a doctor and a Muslim. His answers are clear, thoughtful, and truly inspiring.
Good evening, Dr. Qureshi. Thanks again for your talk. I too am a medical doctor, so I really appreciated a lot of the aspects that you brought in from the medical standpoint.
Sure.
But just in your own personal journey through all of this, was there anything during your residency, anything during your medical training that also pointed you towards I guess the claims of Christ? Any other personal anecdotes you could think of?
There are plenty of personal anecdotes. Thank you so much, Dr. France, asking the question. There are plenty of personal anecdotes. I find that on a stage like this, if you share the personal anecdotes, they get mixed up with the historical, logical argumentation, and so people start saying, oh, you believe that because of this personal anecdote, look how weak your beliefs are. And so generally speaking, I don't bring them up. But since we've distanced ourselves from that, I'll share this. I had become a Christian by this point, so take that into account. When I was a third-year medical student, I was doing OB-GYN rotations, and we were at a high-risk facility in Norfolk, Virginia. And so we got the worst of the worst. My whole time, in my 2 months of OB-GYN rotations, I saw one family. Everyone else was single mothers or drug addicts or what have you. One night, a 15-year-old girl comes in labor. And it turns out she was not willing to have her baby, and so she had taken a significant amount of crack cocaine because she had heard that that would cause you to go into premature labor. And she did. The baby was born, and I'm sorry, this is difficult to remember. They had the baby being examined by the neonatologists, and just very small, very light, and breathing heavily, and obviously on the verge of death. And I asked what the situation was. I knew about the baby before I knew about the mother. And so I asked what the situation was. They told me. I went to see the mother, and I walked in the mother's room to ask her what had happened, because they didn't tell me all the details. And I walked in, and I saw her texting, and not a single care in the world, laughing, texting. And I asked her, what's going on? Are you concerned? Is this the right room? Is this the right baby? And she would not refer to the baby as her. She would refer to her as it. It was just something that didn't matter. Now, how does this play in? I was shocked that day, absolutely shocked at the level of apathy. In fact, I would say an anger welled up in me at the level of apathy towards this girl. And so I went and I started reading her H&P. I started reading her records, and when I found out her history, she had been abused as a child. Her family all did drugs. She didn't have a father in the picture. And I'm reading this and I say, who do I get angry at? Who am I supposed to be angry at here? Is it her? Is it the person who is supposed to be in her life and take care of her as a father? Is it the people who are supposed to protect her from? Who do I get angry at? And for the first time, I was just furious at the sin in the world. And yet, all of a sudden, I had this desire to care for this girl. Despite what she had done, despite the heinous crime that she had just committed, killing another human being in my perspective, I had this desire to care for her. And all of a sudden it hit me, and I'm not a father yet, but it hit me that the love of a father goes beyond any sin. The love of a father who understands their child goes beyond any sin. I think about my father, who I call Abba. If I sin against Abba, it doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter what I do. He would still love me. Now, the gospel message is that God is more loving than any human being we can imagine. If my father would forgive me no matter what, by definition, God has to be more loving than that. Now, in Islam, it's clear in the Quran, God does not love those who are unrighteous. This isn't something I'm making up. It's in the Quran. God does not love the sinners. And so, as you look through the Quran, you don't have unconditional love. You have love for those who perform. You have love for those who are good Muslims, but not unconditional love. And to me, that makes God less loving than a human, which I don't think is possible. And so, again, this is a personal anecdote. This is something that tied things together for me. The beauty of the gospel message is that God loves even those who sin because He understands. And that for me was powerful. Thank you so much for asking the question.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
So being a Muslim, as you can already imagine, My main problem is with the Christian doctrine of Godhood of Jesus. So there's a couple of questions that are related. First of all, I find this concept logically fallacious. Like there are many aspects to its logical fallacy, as in maybe one of them could be that how can God be finite and then infinite at the same time? Like this is like it's like saying that there could exist a square circle. It's a logical fallacy, right? So when we say that Jesus was God or Son of God, we are actually saying that God existed in finitude during the life of Jesus, and he also is infinite at the same time. This is logically fallacious. Now, because you are like you're coming from a historical standpoint.
Did you want me to respond to that, or are you having
it's a
something
relate.
else?
Like the same question continuing. So, because you're coming at it from a historical standpoint, another thing that adds, like the historical evidence that adds, like that supports this argument, is that the concept of Trinity, the word Trinity itself, it doesn't appear as a theological term till near the end of the 2nd century after Jesus. So it was first used as trias by Theophilus, the bishop of Antioch, in AD 180. So we can, and like adding up to that, when you refer to Mark chapter 14, verse 62, which is what you say is the proof that Jesus claimed to be God, are you really applying the same criteria of objectivity that you were applying previously to the Quran when interpreting this as meaning that Jesus is claiming himself to be God? Because if you like look at it completely objectively, looking at the entire text, like there is nothing in the entire text that's saying that Jesus claimed to be God, and in fact the verse that you yourself quote is actually saying Son of Man. So I mean,
These are great
I think you
questions.
get.
Don't go anywhere. What's your name?
Munzir.
Munzir. Where are you from?
I'm from Pakistan.
Pakistan. 𝗙𝗿𝗀𝗲𝗏 𝗙𝗲𝗄𝗡 I had the exact same questions when I was when I practiced Islam. What I want to point out is that first and foremost, what we have to see is what Jesus claimed for himself. Now, the secondary stuff that follows, the theological unfolding or unpacking of what he said, we can spend years and years debating what it means. But what did he say about himself? That's the first thing we want to look at. So again, that's a historical perspective. Theologians argue all day long, back and forth, back and forth. You know, theologians argue all the time, and I just sit back and watch and smile because you can't really prove it one way or another. But when it comes to historical events, we can show with relative degrees of certainty, if the evidence is good, if the records are good, what the most likely conclusion is. So first, and let me give you an answer before, if you feel like interjecting, we can talk afterwards. First, I want to point out you are absolutely right. The term Trinity is not used till the end of the 2nd century. What is the doctrine of God called in the Quran? In Islam, what is the doctrine of God called?
Tawheed.
Tawheed. Is that in the Quran?
No,
the word Tawheed.
The word Tawheed is a derived word from Ahad.
Alhamdulillah, good. So you understand, the word Tawheed is not itself in the Quran. In the same way, the word Trinity is not itself in the Bible. This doesn't pose a problem. The Shahada is not found in the Quran. You have the components of the Shahada in the Quran, but you do not, hold on, you do not have La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah in that way found in the Quran. The components are found in the Quran. With the Trinity, the components are found in the Bible. So,
the word Tawheed does appear in the Hadith.
Oh, that's great, but it's not in the Quran.
Narrations of the Prophet.
And the Hadith is much later. So we're looking at you asked for the Bible, and we have within the early canonical tradition, people calling God a Trinity in the early canonical tradition. In fact, much closer to Jesus' time than the Hadith were to Muhammad's time. So whichever way you stack it, when you're consistent, you end up with a stronger case for the Trinity, for Jesus' deity. Now I want to continue on to your next part of your question, which is Jesus finite or infinite? The argument is that Jesus is, actually I'm going to pose it in a slightly different way. Can Allah come onto this world if He wants? Can He be in this world if He wants?
I wouldn't think so.
You wouldn't think so. So Allah's omnipotence is limited. He can't come onto this world.
It's like basically Allah Ta'ala cannot do logically fallacious thing. Like he cannot create a square circle, right? Because that's something logically
But
fallacious.
how do we
there
know
are
that's what
certain
this
things
is?
that Allah
But
cannot.
how do we know that's what this is? Because, for example, in Surah Al-Imran, when Allah is talking to Moses, it says in Surah Al-Imran, I think it's Surah Al-Imran, it might be Surah 18, but double check, that Allah, as he spoke to Moses, Allah was in the bush. Allah was in the bush. So if you want to say that meant something else, well, you're going to have to argue with the Quran on that one. It seems to be pretty clear that Allah can emanate His voice from a physical place. He can be in a physical place in a sense. In the same way, I don't believe that God coming to this earth limits His omnipotence. It's not a limitation of His omnipotence. Jesus has taken on flesh. God the Father is still everywhere. God, Jesus, the Son, is here on this earth. It's a limitation in that sense, but it's not a limitation of His nature. He is both the divine and human nature. That's the argument. Now, I want to talk about briefly, and then we're going to have to go to the next question, but let's talk afterwards for sure. You asked about the Son of Man. You said He's not calling Himself the Son of God, He's calling Himself the Son of Man. I'm emphasizing to you, my friend, when this hit me, again, while I was practicing Islam, when this hit me, it hit me like a bolt of lightning. The claim Son of God, according to Jews at that time, was not anything divine. Adam was called the Son of God. Solomon was called the Son of God. In the Psalms it says, you are gods. It's not a divine claim to call someone a son of God. But when someone refers to that Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven, who's going to receive glory, authority, and sovereign power, and people of every nation and language are going to worship Him with the worship due only to God, that Son of Man is more than just a human. He is divine. He's going to be worshipped by all people of all time. So when Jesus calls Himself the Son of Man, it's not the Son of God title. And lots of Christians get this wrong, so I'm not pointing the finger at you. Lots of Christians say, oh, Son of Man means He's human, and Son of God means He's God. No, it's the other way around. In the Jewish context, Son of God was a normal human title. Son of Man, from Daniel 7, that was something divine. Go back and read Daniel chapter 7. See that this man is worshipped by all people from all eternity. This man, or one who looks like a human anyway, is worshipped by all people alongside of God the Father. That's the one Jesus is claiming to be. Definitely understand that point that I'm trying to make. And so when you see that Jesus' claim is found there in Mark 14:62, it's found in all the Gospels, and every time Jesus uses the term Son of Man, He's alluding to that. You cannot extract that from the Gospels. So please put Mark 14:62 next to Daniel chapter 7 and see what Jesus is claiming for Himself. And we'll talk afterwards for the rest. Lord bless you, my friend.
Thank you for watching. My prayer is that this video strengthens your faith and reminds you of God's unfailing love. If you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe and join us for more inspiring content. See you in the next video.